what can we do? What can you do with the elections data? There is a very big process going on, and I'm really passionate about sharing this. I'm also super happy to be here with Jordan. Jordan is one of the BigQuery team founder members. So I don't know.
No, I think that it's really important to understand what's going on in government and with elections, and I'm really excited that we're able to use technology that I work on in order to enable people to do these important things. So I'm not just excited that people are using my technology, I'm excited that people are going to be able to use it to do things that will change the world.
Yes, so please take these tools, bring them to your companies, bring them to whatever are your challenges, and also use them for good, use them for civic purposes. So let's briefly review technology in the US elections.
Thanks, Felipe. So in 2004, this was really the first election, US presidential election, in which technology played a big impact. And I don't know if you remember Howard Dean. Howard Dean was a governor of a small state, not very well known, but he was getting massive amounts of small online donations, and this really kind of caused people to wake up to the idea of using the internet for elections. Now I have Howard Dean versus Howard Dean because Howard Dean also sort of died by technology in the election. On January 19th, he was giving a speech after one of the primaries, and he emitted this sort of high-pitched squeal. And these 2 seconds of squeal then became a viral video that was replayed over and over again across the networks and on YouTube. And this really kind of made him. There's nothing worse for a candidate than being made to look foolish, and this sort of torpedoed his campaign. So we see also the positive sides and the negative sides of technology in elections. Now, if you fast forward to 2012, you could argue that it was Obama versus Romney, and you could argue that Obama won. But it was really the big data nerd election. It was each candidate's campaign team had big data analysis systems that were named after whales, and it turned out that the Obama team's whales crushed Romney's. They had software that allowed them to do things like figure out how to get people to the polls, how to buy media and spend less, sort of all these areas. And we're on the Romney side. Basically, on election day, it fizzled. So it was really kind of a resounding victory. Regardless of which candidate you liked, it was a resounding victory for the nerd teams that won.
Yes, so what we're going to do today matters a lot. You can go back to when the other Clinton was elected to be president. There was no internet. Then for Bush, we saw the first ads on the internet. Then Obama started doing the first A/B testings on a political campaign. And now, 4 years ago, we had the whales battling. And today I have some challenges for Jordan. And we're going to use some pretty interesting big data sets. If you know Twitter, they allowed us to use their data. We are ingesting this in real time.
And we also have the federal election campaign data set. The U.S. government has a website of every campaign donation given to the candidates, and also what they're spending their money on.
Yes. What can we learn from it? Next, if this data this data set, it's a little raw. So we have our friends at Open Secrets that have taken this data, they have cleaned it up, and they've made it available under an open data license. So we're going to be using that too.
We also have every Reddit comment since 2007, just to give sort of a less official, but perhaps just as enlightening vision of what's happening with the candidates.
Yes, I have to thank Jason Baumgartner that has been collecting and making these comments available, and we're going to have fun there. Wikipedia, that's a lot of page views, around 50 billion page views a month. what can we see there? That's part of the challenge today.
Yeah, and this is just one table that's half a terabyte. We have basically, this is just 1 month's worth, and we're going to be analyzing considerably more than that.
GDELT, all of the news in the world, everything that is happening, collected by Kalai Vlitaru starting 30 years ago until 15 minutes ago, more than 300 million events. That's also in our tables.
All right, I guess before we start, sorry, was this, I want to just provide a little bit editorial note. We're going to show a lot of visualizations. We're going to show a lot of data. We, Felipe and I, may be partisan, but we're not trying to show anything partisan here. We're just trying to show the data. But you guys are certainly have ideas and things that you'd like to show. We're trying to kind of inspire. You guys can take the types of things that we're doing and then go off and make a persuasive argument. But we're going to try to just let the data speak for itself today.
Yes, someone told me not to speak about politics. I think we will data speak about politics. Let's start with money.
Sounds good.
What tool are we going to use today?
So I work on Google BigQuery. I know BigQuery really well, and I think BigQuery is great for analyzing election data. But if you're not familiar with Google BigQuery, it's a big data SQL query engine that you don't have to spin up any instances. It's just all the data is there. And one of the things that's underappreciated about it, and we're going to leverage today, is that it's one global namespace. So you can join any two tables against any other table.
And it's really, really fast. And it connects with different tools. We're going to start with Redash to run some visualizations. So my first challenge for you, Jordan, is can you show me how much money are the candidates getting this year?
All right. Well, so the first visualization I have, and I'm going to use Redash for this, and I'm going to go over the Open Secrets individual campaign donations data set here. And we're joining it with the candidates. We're filtering by codes that we don't care about, and since there's so many candidates this time around, we want to filter out by only candidates that got at least 8,000 donations and at least $5,000 or 5,000 donations in a month. So then I just ran that query. It took 8 seconds, and here's the results. But we want to make a nice visualization for it. So I'm opening up the Redash visualization editor. We can use a bar chart with the X column month. The Y column, we want just amount, and then we group it by recipient. And here we are. So we can see that at the beginning of 2015, it was Hillary Clinton was getting by far the most donations, and then fast forward out to March, Bernie Sanders actually eclipsed Hillary in the dollar amount of donations. And we see that so Ted Cruz was increasing, and one interesting thing you might want to note is Donald Trump is this little tiny line here. Donald Trump is essentially self-financing his election, so he's not really taking in much in the way of donations
until now. But now, if we wanted to jump to the past, if we wanted to see what happened to Howard Dean, the story you were mentioning earlier today, how do you load this data? How do you bring it into BigQuery?
Sure. So, the Open Secrets data that we have that we were able to make public was just 2016. So if we want to look at historical elections, we have to use the data that we've downloaded from the Federal Election Commission, and this is sort of what their download page looks like. And I've downloaded that data, and I've uploaded it to Google Cloud Storage, and I'm using a feature on BigQuery called federated tables, which means that the table doesn't live in BigQuery, it lives in some external data source. In this case, it's cloud storage. So this is it's going to go over all of the individual donations. It's going to read them as CSV, and it's sort of a slightly weird format. And because it's a slightly weird format, the donations don't tell you who you're donating to. It just tells you the code of the committee you're donating to. So you have to join against the committee, and then you have to join the committee against the candidate. So I've just sort of done a bunch of that work and written that to a summary table. And this is the summary table that shows the candidate, who gave the money, and how much they gave. And it's, that table is 2.5 gigabytes, and that's everything from 1980 until the most recent elections. So now let's look at the Howard Dean moment. So I'm going to run over that summary table that I built, and we're going to look for candidate Howard Dean and John Kerry, because those are the two ones that those are the two Democratic frontrunners at the time. And the time range we're going to use is between the end of 2003 to the beginning of 2004. And I'm not going to show you building this visualization because it was just essentially the same as the last one, except we select line chart instead of bar chart. And so you can see this is the numbers of donations per week, and Howard Dean is really just crushing it. You see, like December 31st, I guess everybody gets their donation in so they can give more next year. But January 19th here, the date of the Dean's Scream, it's interesting. His supporters were still supporting him. He was still getting donations after that. But this really gave his opponent a lot more ammunition. Realized that he was vulnerable, and people realized, hey, I'm gonna give to this other guy.
Wow, that's how you can jump to the past, go to any moment. There's a lot of SQL here. I don't know who knows SQL here, SQL. Yes, my kind of people, but not everyone. So what kind of tools would you use to use this same data to explore it in other ways without a line of SQL?
Let's see. All right, so this is Tableau. Tableau is a business intelligence visualization tool. And Tableau has built-in support for BigQuery. So I'm going to connect to BigQuery from Tableau, and I'm going to connect to the. So look at my project, fill out my campaign funding data set, and I'm going to use this summary table, drag it over here. Tableau goes and looks up the schema. Cardinality, which types of fields they are, and then I can build a new visualization with this. And so all I have to do is just start dragging and dropping. So I'm going to drop amount to rows because we're looking at rows, and then of course that's not very interesting because it just sums up all the rows. But let's then use columns as candidate affiliation, so we can see how much money has been given to various political parties. And of course there's lots of political parties, but in the US the Democratic Party and the Republican Party get all of the donations. And this is really disturbing because this, oh, here we go. That looks better. So this is a visualization. I basically just took the same table and just did a little more dragging and dropping that I won't do up here. But this is showing the amount of money that is donated by state, whether they give more to Republicans or more to Democrats. And we can actually we can go year by year here. So let's look at 2008. Come on, 2008. There we go. The year of Obama's first candidacy. You can see that the coasts are very blue. The center of the country is red. They're giving more to Republicans, but there's a smattering of blue throughout the country. Then, if you look at the re-election, the things had solidified really in the center of the country, and basically they're giving very, very heavily to the Republican side.
Interesting. Back to 2016. How are our candidates doing so far? Primaries.
Okay. Well, I don't know if people are following the primaries, but they're changing a lot. There's a bunch of these primaries. So we have a Google spreadsheet that has the winners of each primary and the amount of votes and delegates for each primary. And so I'm going to use a feature of BigQuery. This is also federated queries, federated tables. But we have a table here that's backed by this Google spreadsheet. So you can see the format is Google Sheets, and so I can run a query to see who is winning. And sort of Hillary Clinton has the most total votes, followed not too far behind by Donald Trump. But one of the cool things about this is you can modify it in real time. So let's stuff the ballot box for Felipe.
Thank you all.
And then rerun this query. Now, sometimes these queries take a few seconds because it's not really optimized for fast access. But hey,
people that use the query know how cool this is. Yes, so that's awesome new feature. Please enjoy it. Now let's start connecting the dots. These candidates are collecting a lot of money. They're spending money. They're getting votes, delegates. Who's the most efficient at this?
Sorry, I'm trying to remember if we have a query for this. Oh, yes, we do have a query for this. So this query is going to operate over the Open Secrets data set again, and we are just going to sum up the amount of donations, but then we're going to join it against the primary results table. So we can see how much money these people are spending. So this is actually the spending side of things per vote that they get. And so we see that Ben Carson was spending the most when he was in the election. He was spending the most amount per vote, followed by Hillary Clinton, and of the remaining major candidates, Bernie Sanders has been the most efficient. I take Donald Trump out of that just because Donald Trump is not actually really running his campaign based on donations.
Yeah, but what's super interesting here is when we start looking at this efficiency, is that we start wondering why. How can one candidate be more efficient than the other? What's driving the results? And at least in the old times, we could say TV. This is the number of mentions each candidate is getting on TV so far, measured by GDELT using the Internet Archive. And you can see that Donald Trump is getting way more mentions on TV. That's a nice way to get votes without spending a lot of money. Followed by Clinton, followed by Sanders, and then everyone else. And what's interesting here is that, okay, TV is working for Trump so very well, but Sanders is getting pretty efficient without getting many TV mentions. And we might wonder why. And that's where our next challenges go. Let's go to old media versus the new media. And we're going to incorporate new tools like data flow.
So Google Cloud Data Flow is a batch and streaming data processing system that lets, sort of like MapReduce, but lets you operate it at a much higher level. And we're using Data Flow to take Twitter data, we're bringing it in, we're transforming the data, and we're writing it to both Firebase or to PubSub and to a BigQuery table.
Yes.
And then we're also going to pull in the data from PubSub and put it into Firebase. And you guys have probably heard a lot about Firebase this week, so I don't have to go into too much detail.
So okay, let's start with all media. Let's look at GDELT, all the news in the world. How is the worldwide media talking about the U.S. candidates?
All right, so we're going to use the last visualization Felipe showed of the television efficiency that used the GDELT data set. So we have the GDELT data set in BigQuery, but the GDELT data set has a lot of data. It has the emotional content of every media article. It has all of the people who are mentioned in it and the positions within the article that they mention. But it can be a little bit hard to query that using SQL. So I'm using another BigQuery feature here called user-defined functions. And user-defined functions allow you to write JavaScript code and have those run inside your query. So what I'm doing is, so for example, I'm trying to figure out for articles that mention political candidates, which one are they really talking about? Because they may, a lot of articles about Clinton also talk about Bernie, but the article is about Clinton. So, we have code that splits out some of these. It's about 200 lines of JavaScript code. And then we can run this directly in BigQuery. So I've created a view that uses this. And, sorry. Sorry. Yes. All right. Details. There we go. And this is the query. Basically, just feeds the source data, this is the raw GDELT table in, and then I can switch back to redash, and we can run this query, and I'm going to this query usually takes about a minute, and I'm going to hope that it's fast today, and
Ooh. We can come back here if it. Oh, we have a saved one.
All right, I'm going to skip to the to the final visualization end, but I'll show what I think I must have just typed something into the box and it screwed it up. But so we're going to show the emotional content of these articles, and so it can be either positive or negative. And for the major political candidates, for just Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and we're going to split those out by country. And so we do a join based on the where the media source comes from, and then we are going to map that to the articles. So what we can see is, and so here's the result. These are of countries that are writing articles about that mention U.S. candidates. This is with the positive versus negative tone. And one thing we should note is we move the average a little bit to basically be the overall average, because overall they were pretty negative about both candidates. So we're sort of like we're resetting the zero. But so the highest positive is Turkey. I guess Turkey really likes Hillary Clinton. The highest negative is Switzerland. The Swiss are not big Donald Trump fans. Maybe he doesn't use their banks. And so you might think, well, you might ask, can you guys plot this on a map? Maybe Felipe was about to ask me that, but we don't have to. Somebody already did. So Curious New, someone who's done a lot of BigQuery queries and that we've worked with in the past, he plotted these in CartoDB. And so this is sort of the map version of which countries are positive and negative about Hillary Clinton. And here's the same for Donald Trump.
Russia really has a positive tone on those articles.
As does Ukraine.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool to be able to look at the worldwide media, join it with where the source of that media comes, join it, look at tone, and start analyzing what happened there. Let's go back to Bernie. Where was the first place you heard about Bernie? Was it TV? Was it the media? Was it Reddit?
I feel like social media picked up on Bernie Sanders before the mainstream media.
How can you show me that with data?
All right. Well, let's check this out. So this is a query that is going to combine multiple data sources together. So this is going to combine our the GDELT data set. This is the view that I created earlier. We're also going to look at all Reddit comments. So we're going to also look at candidate popularity in Reddit comments. And then we're going to look at Wikipedia page views. So maybe people were looking at the candidate's web page a lot and see when those picked up. And then we're computing a trailing average, so so that the numbers don't bounce up and down too much. So beautiful. Maybe I can reload this page. Just to give an idea of how big this query is, this query is 5.24 terabytes.
That's a lot of data.
So that's a lot of data. It takes about a minute, and there's a lot of stuff that has that. We're running a user-defined function over billions of entries in GDELT. We're taking these multiple data sources from different places, and so here's what the visualization looks like. So we can see that really the mainstream media and Reddit and Wikipedia all really kind of picked up on the Bernie story at about the same time. Perhaps, so this GDELT is sort of our proxy for the mainstream media. Perhaps it was a bit higher, these peaks are a bit higher for Reddit and Wikipedia. So maybe this is showing that social media was more devoted to Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And then certainly this Reddit line has stayed higher for most of the time frame that we have.
Yes. It seems that people really enjoy when we mention Reddit. Yes. Let's look at what people are talking in Reddit about. Are they talking about Clinton, Sanders, Trump?
All right. So we're basically going to look over all comments in Reddit and run a query that figures out how many authors are commenting about these candidates. And the query is not all that interesting. Let me just see if we're just filtering by the phrases Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and then we can see what the timeline looks like.
Yes. So we can see that there are more authors talking about Bernie Sanders than Trump, than Clinton, and that's just how Reddit goes.
Right. Do you want to? So we could. Not everybody uses the full name Bernie Sanders. So
that's a good question.
They could just say Bernie, or Hillary, or I think just Trump. Even though the subreddit for Donald Trump is called the Donald, so maybe in that he gets called just Donald more often. But one of the nice things about this in BigQuery is you can it's easy to change your mind. It's easy to just run a different query, and hopefully this will be fast today.
How long does it take to analyze all of Reddit comments?
So it should take only a few seconds, but
how fast is our network?
I'm not gonna blame it on the network today. I will own this. I'll switch back if it doesn't finish in the next 5 seconds. All right, we can jump to something else. Oh, here we go.
Yay!
5 seconds.
Right
it knew. So it looks about the same actually. So, but I think the numbers are much higher.
56,000 authors talking about Trump.
Yeah,
that's a lot of Redditors. But then it's hard to know if they are talking positively about Trump, negatively. But there are some subreddits that are dedicated to each candidate. Sanders for president, the Donald, Hillary Clinton, each has their own group of subredditors that have different behavior, different likes. And a very interesting question I have there is, where were these supporters 4 years ago?
Okay.
For the previous election.
So what we can do is, for this one, we're going to look at the subreddits that are devoted, this Reddit spaces that are devoted to the particular candidates. In this case, it's Sanders for president, the Donald, and Hillary Clinton. And then we're going to join it against the history. So we're pulling out authors, and then we're joining it against history to figure out what are these authors posting in 4 years ago in 2012. Like, what were they up to before they started talking about politics?
Any guess?
So the Sanders supporters were talking about space and Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street kind of makes sense. Trump supporters were talking about guns and Ron Paul. And I think there's one that's interesting is then the Hillary supporters are basically enough Ron Paul. They had it with. So I think it was already setting up. The Hillary versus Donald for the.
I love being able
show.
to find this. Okay, thank you. Back to real time. Back to what's happening right now. Last 60 seconds. What are people talking about now?
All right, so actually in the last campaign, one of the things that the candidates really started doing is they started monitoring Twitter in real time. So they would notice, hey, the candidate made a statement. What did Twitter think of it? And they could use that to shape their message and how their message was getting out to their supporters. So we have a Twitter feed that is running Google Cloud Dataflow, and we're pulling out anything that mentions the candidates. And we're writing it to two places. One is we're streaming it into a BigQuery table, and the other one is we're writing it to Cloud PubSub. And so I'm going to jump to. We have a really simple server that is in JavaScript, only 100 lines of code, that's going to read the. Come on. There we go. It's going to read from PubSub, and it's going to write it to Firebase. And this is just sort of the logging of the IDs of these tweets. But so really simple. We also have a very small website that's going to create a dashboard for us. And we'll allow that. So let me jump back to. So here's the Firebase output here. We can see that we're writing tweets. And then here's our dashboard. So the dashboard is basically just pulling up the latest tweet and displaying it here. And we can also see sort of the hashtags that show up most often with the candidates.
Yes, we have no idea what tweets are being shown in real time, so fingers crossed.
So it's always dangerous when you try to show social media in real time in a talk because I won't even fill in the rest of that statement.
What kind of interesting things can we do with these tweets?
So let's look at. So I mentioned that the candidates were using this in real time, and so let's just look at the things that have been tweeted, like the tweets that have been done since this talk started. So it's been about 30 minutes since we've been here, and so we can see there's been 31,000 tweets, but that's not really that impressive. I mean, 30 minutes is a long time. So let's look at seconds.
Second.
Oh, thank you. I'm an over pluralizer. What about the last 10 seconds? How many tweets were in the last 10 seconds? Boom. So we have 45 tweets in the last 10 seconds that are already in BigQuery. So this is from the time when somebody posted this they hit send on Twitter. It's gone through the Twitter API. It's gone to PubSub, and then it's gone through Dataflow, and it's gone into BigQuery, and it's immediately queryable.
Wow.
So let's try to look at something that's something like what the candidates would want to do. So I'm going to jump back to Redash, and so we're going to look at the tweets. We're going to look at the hashtags of things that have been happening in the last hour, things that people have been tweeting about that are in tweets about the candidates, and we're going to look and see how that compares to yesterday. So this will help hopefully show us how are things. What's new? What things are trending that weren't here yesterday? So here is what we have. We have Trump tweeting, people tweeting about Trump and the Second Amendment, but also Bernie. That's sort of interesting. I wonder if there was some news about that.
That's Clinton.
What interesting Clinton things? Probably can't say some of them on.
Real-time data, sorry.
Adopt-a-palooza, that's anyway. So yeah, real-time.
Yes, real-time data.
Social media is always interesting.
Yes. So we have about 9 minutes left. Are we going to do this?
All right. So we.
Are we?
Unfortunately. We cannot predict we could, but we are not going to predict the next president. But we didn't want to get out of here without showing some prediction. after all, that we did a reasonably good job of that last time. And Google has these amazing tools that you've probably been hearing about the last few days, TensorFlow and Cloud Data Lab.
Those are our tools. TensorFlow, an open source tool to run machine learning algorithms. Data Lab, a pretty nice open source notebook environment to mix all of our elements together. So we're going to try to predict who said what.
That seems like a safer thing to do.
Safer.
So I'm going to look at the data that we have. And so we've gathered some statements from various candidates. It's not a whole lot of data. Like, so we're gonna build a machine learning model with only 200K of data, and I'll show you what these look like. These are just statements that various candidates have said that we've sort of collected from the media. And we're going to use this, and we're going to feed it into. We're going to feed it into a machine learning model. I'm going to build the model while I'm talking. So let me just run to this cell. Okay, so we're going to use, this is Google Cloud Data Lab. This is the sort of IPython or Jupyter notebook for doing scientific computing, and it has nice integration with TensorFlow. So this seems like a lot of code, but most of this code actually is just manipulating the text. So we're pulling this data out of Google Cloud Storage, and then we're reading the data files and splitting the data files. That's actually most of the code. And then, so this is really all the TensorFlow code that we need to do this. Most of it is just sort of setting up outputs, setting up what it means to be right, or what we're trying to minimize or maximize. In this case, it's the cross entropy. And we're going to use an FTRL optimizer, which doesn't really matter what that means. It's an algorithm that's used in Google for ads, and it also has. I mean, you could essentially use a lot of different optimizers here, but this one works out pretty well. And then we're going to minimize the cross entropy. We want to get basically as close as possible to the correct results. And then this loop here just runs the training, so we can see the output of the accuracy of this is about 72%. So that may not seem all that high, but if you consider that we had a human actually try to figure out how well they could do at categorizing these, and the human only got about 60%. So we've built a model that can do better than a human at identifying these statements. All right, so now I have some quotes from the various candidates, and we can run this model and see if we can predict what they're actually saying. And these quotes were not part of the training set, and so these are things basically just from their website. So let's see. Oh, lovely. There we go. So, predicted Clinton, actually Clinton. We will dismantle.
We will totally dismantle Iran's global terror network. Will TensorFlow know? Yes. Yeah. What my campaign is about is a political revolution. Millions of people standing up and saying, enough is enough. Our government belongs to all of us and not just the handful of billionaires. Who said that?
Bernie Sanders.
Who knows? You can read the Cruz one.
Okay. We need a commander-in-chief who will prioritize U.S. national security interests. And that one was Ted Cruz.
And that's pretty good.
So here's something that I don't think any candidates have said.
Trying something that they never said.
But
yes.
Does anybody have a suggestion of a statement they want us to try to guess which candidate would be more likely to say it?
Any random statement, just to try it out?
Anyone?
TensorFlow is great. We love TensorFlow.
Okay.
We love TensorFlow. Okay, we're running out of time now.
Yes.
Time to close this talk. I hope you were entertained. But this is more not only about data, not only about how we analyze and entertain ourselves. It's how we use the different Google Cloud tools, TensorFlow, Data Lab, BigQuery, of course, and how we connect different data sets, how we draw lines between these points, and take these tools and bring them to our world, how we can change where we live. We can vote to start with, or not everyone can vote, but we still can be part of the process.
And these elections are important, and we hope that these tools that we built will inspire you to say, hey, I can do that, that's easy. Inspire you to actually go out and try them and change the world.
Yes. And thank you to everyone that helped us run these demos, Reddit, Twitter.
We had the data folks from the Dataflow team, Sam McVitie, Sarah Robinson helped with the Firebase. The Google Brain team helped with the TensorFlow. Lots of people we're probably forgetting.
Yes, Redash also. Yeah.
Redash, yes.
Yes, big thanks to developer advocates, everyone that makes I/O happen. And if nothing else works, there are so many other things we can do. We can be back in 2 years to talk about the World Cup again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.